Some people never find out who was living in their house. This person did.
I found a footprint on my bathroom ceiling. That's how it started. I'd lived in that house for almost 3 years. It was a small 2-bedroom place on the outskirts of Terre Haute, Indiana. Nothing special. Built in the 70s, had a basement I never used, an attic I'd only been in once when I first moved in. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly older couples and a few renters like me. I worked nights at a distribution warehouse about 20 minutes away, so I slept during the day and was gone from around 9 at night until 6 in the morning. The footprint was in late October. I remember because I'd just put up a few Halloween decorations outside and came in to take a shower. I looked up while the water was warming and saw it. A dusty, bare footprint pressed into the white ceiling tile above the shower. It was small, maybe a size 7 or 8. I stood there staring at it for a long time. My first thought was that it had always been there and I just never noticed, but I knew that wasn't true. I'd repainted that bathroom ceiling myself the previous spring. It was clean. That print was new. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe condensation had formed some weird pattern. Maybe I was seeing things. I wiped it with a wet rag and forgot about it. Or tried to. A few days later, I noticed food missing from my kitchen. Not a lot. A sleeve of crackers I was sure I hadn't finished, a jar of peanut butter that seemed lower than I remembered, a bottle of water from a case I kept by the fridge. Small things, things you'd talk yourself out of noticing. I figured I was just being absent-minded. Then I started hearing sounds during the day when I was trying to sleep. Soft creaking above me. I lived alone, no pets, no trees close enough to scrape the roof. It sounded like weight shifting on old wood. I banged on the ceiling once with a broom handle, and it stopped. I convinced myself it was animals, squirrels maybe, raccoons. I made a mental note to call pest control, and never did. One morning I came home from work, and something felt off. The air in the house smelled different. Not bad exactly, just human, like someone had been breathing in a closed space. I checked every room, closets, under the beds, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. Every door was locked, every window latched. That weekend, I bought a cheap security camera, one of those small ones you can connect to your phone. I set it up in the hallway facing the living room and kitchen. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to prove to myself that I was being paranoid. Monday morning, I checked the footage from the night before. For the first few hours, nothing. Just my dark, empty hallway. Then, at around 2 in the morning, a figure stepped into frame. My whole body went cold. It was a person, a thin man, barefoot, wearing what looked like my clothes, one of my old t-shirts and a pair of my sweatpants. He walked calmly into my kitchen, opened the fridge, took out a container of leftover pasta, and sat on my kitchen floor, eating it with his hands. He sat there for almost 15 minutes. Then he stood up, put the container back in the fridge, and walked out of frame toward the hallway that led to the bathroom. I almost threw up. I was shaking so hard I dropped my phone twice trying to call the police. They came within 10 minutes. I showed them the footage. 2 officers went through the house while I waited outside. When they got to the attic, they found it. Someone had been living up there. There was a pile of my old blankets arranged into a bed, empty water bottles, food wrappers, a small battery-powered fan, and a hole. A small cut-out square in the attic floor, hidden behind the water heater in the hallway closet. That was how he'd been getting in and out. The hatch to the attic was still locked from the outside, but he'd made his own entrance. They never caught him. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They figured he'd been going in and out through a vent on the side of the roof that connected to the attic space. He could have been living there for weeks, maybe months. The officers told me it happens more than people think. That didn't make me feel better. I moved out that week. I didn't pack everything. I just took what mattered and left. I still think about it sometimes. How I was sleeping during the day, alone in that house, and someone was right above me, watching through gaps in the ceiling, wearing my clothes, eating my food. I don't know who he was or where he went, and that's the part that still keeps me up at night.
If you've ever driven alone on a back road at night, this one's going to stay with you. I was 17 the night someone tried to get into my car on Route 9. It was a Friday in January. I'd stayed late at my friend Marcus's house playing video games and lost track of time. By the time I left, it was almost 1 in the morning. My parents were already asleep and didn't know I was still out. I had about a 30-minute drive home through mostly empty back roads in rural New Jersey. Pine trees on both sides, no streetlights, the kind of road where your headlights are the only thing between you and total darkness. About 15 minutes into the drive, I noticed a car behind me. It wasn't unusual to see another car on Route 9 even that late, but this one was close, really close. Their headlights were filling my rearview mirror, bright enough that I had to tilt it down. I slowed a little, expecting them to pass. They didn't. They just stayed right on me. I sped up to about 55. They matched my speed. I slowed back down to 40. They did too. This went on for maybe 5 minutes before I started getting genuinely nervous. I turned onto a smaller road, one that wasn't on my usual route home. They followed. My stomach dropped. I called Marcus. He didn't answer. I thought about calling 911, but kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe they were just going the same direction. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the road I'd turned onto led to almost nothing. A few farmhouses and a dead end near an old grain elevator. Nobody had any reason to be on that road at 1 in the morning unless they lived there. I made another turn. They followed again. Now I was sure. I started driving faster. The road was narrow and dark, and I didn't know it well. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I kept checking the mirror. The headlights were still there, maybe 3 car lengths back. Then they flashed their high beams. Once. Twice. 3 times. I don't know why, but that terrified me more than anything else. I saw a gas station ahead. It was closed, but the lot was lit up. I pulled in fast, swinging into a spot right under one of the lights. I locked my doors and grabbed my phone. The car pulled into the lot behind me. It was a dark sedan, older model. I couldn't make out the driver. It stopped about 30 feet away. Just sat there with the engine running. I was shaking. I dialed 911 and told them someone had been following me. The dispatcher told me to stay in my car and keep my doors locked. She said a unit was on the way. The sedan sat there for what felt like forever. Then slowly, the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing dark clothes. He didn't walk toward me right away. He just stood next to his car, looking at mine. Then he started walking. Not fast, just a calm, steady walk straight toward my driver's side window. I laid on the horn, long and loud. He stopped, stood there for a second, then turned around, got back in his car, and drove away. No rush, no tires squealing, just pulled out of the lot like nothing happened. The police arrived about 8 minutes later. I gave them the description. Dark sedan, tall man, dark clothes. I didn't get a plate number. They searched the area and found nothing. They followed me home and told my parents what happened. My mom didn't let me drive alone at night for almost a year. I still don't know what that man wanted. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't pulled into that lit parking lot, if I had kept driving down that dead-end road in the dark. Sometimes I think about the way he walked toward my car, so calm, like he'd done it before, like he knew exactly what he was doing. That's what scares me the most. Not the chase, the calm.
The person on the other end of that call was never identified.
For 11 days, someone called my mother's landline at exactly 3:07 in the morning. This was back in 2014. My mom lived alone in a small ranch-style house in eastern Kentucky. She was 62 years old, retired, and had lived in that house since before I was born. She still had a landline because the cell service out there was terrible. I lived about 4 hours away in Lexington with my wife and didn't visit as often as I should have. The first call came on Tuesday. She told me about it that morning. Said the phone rang at 3 in the morning. She picked it up and no one was there. Just silence, not even breathing. She said it felt like an open line, like someone had dialed and was just holding the phone. She hung up after a few seconds and went back to bed. The second call came the next night, same time, 3:07. She picked up again, silence. She said hello a few times and hung up. She figured it was a wrong number or some telemarketer glitch. I told her not to answer it if it happened again. It happened again and again, every night at 3:07. She stopped answering after the fourth call, but the phone would ring 6 or 7 times before going silent. She couldn't sleep through it. She said the ringing echoed through the house, and each time it went off, her heart would pound so hard she couldn't fall back asleep. By day 7, I told her to unplug the phone at night. She did, but the next morning, she called me upset. She said she'd unplugged the phone before bed, but when she woke up at 3:07, she heard a sound she couldn't explain, a faint ringing, not from the phone, from somewhere outside, like a phone ringing in her yard. She looked out the window but couldn't see anything. It lasted about 30 seconds and stopped. I drove down that weekend. I checked everything, the phone line, the yard, the area around the house, nothing out of the ordinary. I stayed the night. At 3:07, the phone rang. I'd plugged it back in to test it. I picked up immediately. Silence. But not empty silence. There was a faint sound in the background, almost like wind or maybe movement, like someone was outside somewhere holding the phone. I said, "Who is this?" Nothing. I said I was going to call the police. Nothing. Then, very faintly, I heard a voice, a whisper. I couldn't make out words. It was too soft, too distorted, like someone pressing their lips to the receiver and barely exhaling a sentence. Then, the line went dead. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I called the phone company and asked them to trace the number. They told me the calls were coming from a number registered to a prepaid phone. No name attached, no address, a burner. I installed motion lights around my mom's property and set up a camera on the front porch. That night, the call came again, 3:07. I didn't answer. I checked the camera footage the next morning. At 3:04, 3 minutes before the call, the motion light on the east side of the house turned on. The camera didn't cover that angle. I walked over to that side of the property and found footprints in the soft dirt beneath her bedroom window. Someone had been standing there while she slept, while the phone rang. I called the police. They came out, took photos of the prints, and filed a report. They increased patrols in the area for a few weeks. I moved my mom in with me temporarily. She didn't want to leave her home, but I didn't give her a choice. The calls stopped after she left. No more 3:07 rings, no more footprints. When she moved back a month later, I had a full security system installed. The calls never came back. But she told me once, about a year later, that she woke up at exactly 3:07
for no reason. She lay in bed in the dark and listened, and she swore she heard something outside her window. Not a phone ringing, just someone breathing.
She thought she was alone in that building. She was wrong.
I used to work the overnight cleaning shift at a medical office building in Dayton, Ohio. It was a 3-story building with about 20 offices: dentists, therapists, a pediatrician, a couple of general practitioners. During the day, it was busy. At night, it was completely empty, just me and the vacuum. I started the job in the fall of 2019. The work was simple: vacuum the hallways and waiting rooms, mop the bathrooms, empty the trash, wipe down surfaces. I'd get there around 10 at night and finish by 4 in the morning. I had keys to every office and a master code for the alarm system. I was the only person in the building. For the first couple months, everything was normal. The building made sounds at night like any old building does. The heat would kick on and the ducts would pop. Doors would settle in their frames. The elevator would hum even though nobody was using it. You get used to it. Then one night in December, I was cleaning the second floor and heard door close on the third floor above me. Not slam, just close. A soft click, like someone had pulled it shut gently. I stopped and listened. Nothing else. I figured it was air pressure from the heating system. It happened sometimes with the lighter doors. A week later, I was mopping the first floor bathroom and heard footsteps above me. Clear, deliberate steps. Not creaking, not settling. Steps. Someone walking across the second floor. I turned off the water and stood completely still. The steps went from one end of the hallway to the other, then stopped. I grabbed my phone and went upstairs. Every office was locked. The hallway was empty. The lights were off. I checked every door, all secure. I told myself it was the building, old pipes, thermal expansion, whatever makes you sleep at night. But it kept happening. Every few shifts, I'd hear something, a door, footsteps. Once I heard what sounded like a chair rolling across the floor in one of the offices on the third floor. I unlocked the door and looked inside. Everything was in its place, chair tucked under the desk, nobody there. I almost quit in January. I was vacuuming the third floor hallway at around 1 in the morning when I saw something that made me freeze. At the far end of the hall, near the stairwell door, there was a light on under one of the office doors, Suite 312, a therapist's office. I knew for a fact that I had not turned that light on. I hadn't cleaned that office yet. I stood there watching the light spill out from under the door. Then I saw a shadow pass through it. Something moved inside that room, something between the light and the door. I didn't imagine it. The shadow moved from left to right, slowly, like someone walking across the room. I left the floor. I went downstairs and sat in my car for 20 minutes. Then I called my supervisor. He told me to call the police if I thought someone was in the building. I did. 2 officers came and searched every room on the third floor. Suite 312 was locked. They had me open it. The light was off. Nobody was inside. Nothing was out of place. They checked the whole building and found nothing. After that night, I started paying closer attention. I began noticing small things. A trash can moved from where I'd left it. A bathroom stall door closed that I'd left open. A paper towel dispenser that had been used after I'd refilled it. One night in February, I was cleaning the second floor and decided to check the security camera footage from the front entrance on my phone. The building had 1 camera at the main door. I scrolled back through the night. Nobody had come in. But then I noticed something. At 11:47 p.m., the camera caught a brief image of the stairwell door on the first floor opening
just slightly, from the inside. Then it closed again. Nobody walked through. The door just opened and shut on its own. I quit the next week. I told my supervisor the job wasn't for me. I never told him the real reason. I don't know who or what was in that building at night. I don't know if someone was hiding in a space I never checked, or if there was an explanation I never found. All I know is I was supposed to be alone in that building, and I wasn't.
What happened on that trail has never been explained.
My friend Derek and I went camping in the Ozarks in the fall of 2021. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip. 2 nights, some hiking, a fire, a few beers. We'd done it a dozen times before. We picked a spot about 6 miles off the main trail, deep enough in the woods that we wouldn't see another person the whole trip. That was the point. We wanted isolation. We set up camp Friday afternoon on a flat clearing near a creek. It was a beautiful spot. Tall oaks, quiet water, no cell service. We had everything we needed. Tent, food, water filter, a hatchet for firewood. By the time the sun went down, we had a good fire going and were sitting in our camp chairs talking about nothing important. Around 9 o'clock, we heard something moving through the woods to the east. Heavy footsteps in the leaves. We both went quiet and listened. It sounded like a person walking, not an animal. The steps were too even, too deliberate. 2 feet, a steady pace, coming closer. Derek grabbed the flashlight and pointed it into the trees. Nothing. The footsteps stopped. We sat there for a full minute in silence, just watching the dark line of trees beyond the firelight. And the sound started again, but this time it was farther away, moving parallel to our camp, walking along the tree line. Then it stopped again. We told ourselves it was a deer, maybe a hiker who wandered off trail. We laughed it off, but neither of us really believed it. We stayed up later than usual and let the fire burn high before going to bed. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke up. I don't know what woke me. I just opened my eyes and was fully alert, the way you are when something is wrong and your body knows before your brain does. I lay in my sleeping bag and listened. The woods were completely silent. No crickets, no frogs from the creek, no wind, nothing. Then I heard breathing. Not Derek. He was asleep next to me, snoring lightly. This was outside the tent, close, right next to the wall. Slow, deep breaths, in and out, steady and calm, like someone standing inches from the fabric, just listening. I didn't move. I don't think I could have. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the tent wall, and I could see the faintest shadow, a shape blocking the dim moonlight that filtered through the nylon. It was a person, standing right next to our tent. I reached over and grabbed Derek's arm. He woke up fast. I put my hand over his mouth and pointed at the wall. He looked. The shadow was still there. The breathing continued. We didn't speak. We barely breathed ourselves. After what felt like 10 minutes, the shadow moved. Slowly. It shifted away from the tent, and I heard footsteps in the leaves again. Walking away. Not rushing, not running. Just calmly walking into the dark. We didn't go back to sleep. We sat in that tent with the hatchet between us and waited for sunrise. As soon as it was light enough to see, we got out and looked around camp. There were footprints in the soft ground next to the tent. Boot prints. Deep ones, like someone had been standing in the same spot for a long time. They led from the tree line to our tent, and then back into the woods heading north. We followed them for about 100 yards before they disappeared on harder ground. We packed up camp in record time. Didn't cook breakfast, didn't filter water, just stuffed everything into our packs and started hiking back to the trailhead. The whole way out, neither of us talked much. We kept looking over our shoulders. Every snapping branch, every rustle in the leaves made us walk faster. About 2 miles from the trailhead, Derek stopped and pointed at something off the trail. Through the trees, maybe 50 yards away, there was a small clearing, and in that clearing was a makeshift shelter built from branches and a blue tarp. Next to it was a blackened fire ring and what looked like old clothing. Someone had been living out there. We didn't stop to investigate. We practically jogged the last 2 miles out. When we got back to the car, we straight drove to the nearest ranger station and reported what we'd found. The ranger nodded like he wasn't surprised. He said they'd check it out. He didn't seem alarmed. That bothered me more than anything. I've been back to the Ozarks since then, but never to that spot, and never without checking over my shoulder when the sun goes down, because whoever was standing outside our tent that night wasn't just passing through. They were watching, and they knew exactly where we were.
Before you go, I have one question. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you and you couldn't explain why? Tell me in the comments. And if these stories keep you up tonight, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what I'll be sharing with you in the coming days is a story I wish I'd never heard. See you in the next episode.